And I always say elitism isn't playing Bach. Elitism is keeping it for yourself. And it's, as Steve just said, it's not about this kind of proselytizing and, that like the New Yorker cartoon, we bring the arts to people who don't want the arts.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually about helping people connect to themselves and connect to each other. Mm-hmm. That's what great music does.
This is A Line Around Your Thoughts, a podcast that centers on conversations with artists, writers, musicians, and creatives from around the Inland Northwest. I'm your host, E.J. Iannelli. This weekend, the Spokane Symphony is performing in Riverfront Park as part of the city's 4th of July celebrations. They'll be the prelude to the big fireworks show at 10 p.m. And the Symphony has their own fireworks planned for their upcoming 81st season, which is themed Music in Living Color. It kicks off in mid-September with a program that features Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, and it wraps up next May with Mahler's Cosmic Scale 5th Symphony. The Symphony's music director, James Lowe, rejoins us this week, accompanied by the new executive director, Steve Wenig, to go over some highlights of the new season. But our conversation also covers perceptions of elitism, a new family-friendly concert series, and, of course, some anecdotes from classical music history. And during the lightning round, we get into earthquakes and reincarnation. Before we dive in, this episode, I am very pleased to say, is sponsored by Spokane Puppetry. They're bringing the acclaimed String and Shadow Puppet Theater Company to Spokane for a night at the Grand Opera. This is an all-ages outdoor show that bills itself as a frenzied romp through the golden age of opera. It's quirky, it's comedic, and it features elaborate costumes, inventive puppet designs, and imaginative storytelling. The show is on Saturday, July 11th, on the Olmsted Brothers Green in Kendall Yards. It starts at 7:30 p.m., and you can bring a picnic blanket or some chairs and make a whole evening of it. Tickets are on a donation model. You can get them at the door, so to speak, or get them online beforehand. For more info on tickets or the show itself, follow Spokane Puppetry on Instagram at Spokane_puppetry, or go to the String and Shadow Puppet Theater website at stringandshadow.com. And thanks, as always, to our Patreon sponsor tier member, Mel Antuna Hewitt, for her ongoing support. You can find her work online at librobuch.com. If you would like to be among those who help keep these weekly conversations going, look for the sponsorship and support page on our website at alaytpodcast.com. Remember, too, that you can get updates and engage with us on Mastodon at alaytpodcast@pnw.zone, on Blue Sky at alayt.bsky.social, and Instagram at alayt_podcast. And now, on to the Rogue Heart Media Studio.
Hello again, EJ.
Hello.
Great to be here, EJ.
And I have to say, I hesitated over the Wenig because I see that and my brain says Wenig.
Yeah, you can say either way.
Which do you prefer?
Wenig.
Wenig, okay, okay. So yeah, welcome Steve, and welcome back, James. Now, Steve, you came on board very recently. I think you're the Symphony's most recent hire as far as the executive team is concerned. And so you came on board in January, is that right?
Yeah.
And you're coming to us from about 10 years at the Oregon Symphony.
Exactly.
And then that was predated by a stint at the Houston Symphony,
You got it. Yep. Yeah.
And what was your role there? Is it very similar to what you're doing now?
So moving kind of forward in time from Houston, I started as an assistant part-time, low-level personnel manager, fumbling my way through arts administration. And that eventually turned into be the full-time personnel manager over a time. Did that for 8 years, and then 3 years as director of community partnerships. This was the coolest role I've ever had. My job was essentially taking this very Eurocentric art form and trying to make it relevant for a very diverse community, mostly Hispanic community in Houston, Texas. Did that for 3 years, then had an opportunity in Portland, where I was the vice president and general manager for the Oregon Symphony for about 10 years. Also got to see a lot of great stuff, including education and community engagement. And that led me to coming here in Spokane, where I've been for 4 months.
And I was able to catch up with a Q&A with you, and you said one of the reasons you were drawn to this was because you felt you could make a difference in Spokane. What sort of difference are you hoping to make?
I think if I had to boil it all down to one word, is how can we be relevant? How can this art form, how can this orchestra, how can these 70 musicians matter in the lives of people in the region? And I think there's so much opportunity here. I think there's so much appreciation for the orchestra. I think there's great music education already happening, and I so look forward to growing that and supporting that. And all these other ways where like the power of music can matter in people's lives. I think there's just so much chance to do that here.
And I know that you started out as a musician, so you were a trumpeter, and I was hoping to get the two of you paired, but the trumpet and viola repertoire is very, very limited.
It's astonishingly,
Yeah.
inexplicably limited. Yeah.
But you went from a sort of practicing musician into a more administrative or more executive role. What explains that change?
I had spent 7 years at a college trying to become an orchestral trumpet player. My dream was to be principal trumpet of the Boston Symphony or the Chicago Symphony, or some big American orchestra, playing the music of Mahler at Mach 2 with my hair on fire. I mean, that was my goal.
You wanted to be the lead into Mahler's Fifth. No?
Yes,
Yeah.
that was all. I practiced it many times. And after doing that for a number of years and, actually getting close at an audition or two, I realized when I was 32, I can keep trying to do this and I'll be 42 and still not have that job to show for it. So the opportunity came up at the Houston Symphony for this part-time assistant personnel manager. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do this job and I'm going to try it for a couple weeks, maybe a month or two. And if trumpet playing calls me back, they say that you don't choose music, it chooses you. And if trumpet playing calls me back, that my destiny will be set and I'll have to go for that trumpet job. And I swear it was like 2 weeks. And I knew I felt so charged up being around the orchestra and the musicians. Even though I wasn't playing it, I still felt really fulfilled. And I kind of knew right away that I was on this other track.
Well, I want to talk about some of the education and outreach activities that you have in mind, but I kind of want to do that within the context of this 2026-2027 season that was just announced. And you've got 9 Masterworks concerts, plus a whole plethora of pops concerts and ancillary concerts. And James, the theme for this season is music in living color. And I have to say, coming from the advertising world, you have a campaign to match because you have chosen, well, maybe not you personally, but your marketing department has chosen a very colorful palette to complement this season.
Absolutely. I think for me, you're talking about the relevancy. A symphony orchestra is not a museum of dead music. It's a living, breathing organism. And it is totally relevant. The music we play speaks to you about your life, your lived experience. My job is to just help people bridge that little gap. And I think this idea of, I call it AR, actual reality. You've got 70 to 100 musicians all on stage giving everything. It is a very, very different experience to sit in a concert hall and experience that from being at home, putting on a recording. So this idea of the vitality of that's the kind of thing that we're trying to get across with this next season.
And you've got a season opener. Actually, ahead of that, we've got a July 4th concert, and that is the Spokane Symphony kind of celebrating with the city. Steve, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I just think it's so important when a community is coming together to celebrate some big civic event, a holiday. I mean, we already do the end of summer where we're turning the page from summer into fall with a couple of free Labor Day concerts, one at Liberty Lake, one at Comstock. But when this one at July 4th is really, really special, our country's 250th anniversary. So for me, music brings people together. It unites people. And I can't think of a better way to do that with music. Something uniting people, something we really sorely need, and I think would agree on. And I'm so happy that we're playing that type of role in our community.
Yeah, so there's this July 4th concert, and then you do, as you mentioned, have programming throughout the summer, but the season really kicks off with the season opener, and this is themed Romeo and Juliet. James, can you walk me through the program on this, which I was pleased to see. You're coming right out of the gate with female composers, so Amy Beach is on this program.
Absolutely, yeah. So every year we survey the orchestra, and they give a list of pieces that they would like to play. And there's usually 3 or 4 that are at the top of the list that a lot of people have repeatedly requested. And Prokofiev, Romeo and Juliet, was at the very, very top of that list. So I thought, well, that's a given. And also the music is amazing and incredible. So we're doing a kind of compilation suite of some of the ballet music that follows the story linearly, because he put together some suites himself, but it's more about a musical structure and not about a narrative. So I wanted to kind of put it back in kind of narrative order. But we open with this crazy overture by Kabalevsky, Colas Brugnon overture, which is such high octane fun that we launch ourselves out of a cannon with that piece. And then we have Amy Beach piano concerto, high romantic, beautiful piece played by Mackenzie Melamed, who is an American pianist but who lives in Finland, and that's how I actually encountered him. I worked with him over there. And he lives in Finland because he was changing flights once in Helsinki, and he saw the language and thought, I want to learn Finnish. So he did. He's one of a handful of people that managed that trick that aren't themselves Finnish. So he's back in the US touring with various orchestras, and that's the piece he's taking around. He's always great for unearthing repertoire that is somehow a little bit hidden in the corners, and bringing it out and really showing what amazing music this is.
And how does this opener tie in with this theme of In Living Color? I know that in past interviews, I mean, we do the food metaphor quite a bit, but we also do this kind of synesthetic exercise where we talk about the color palette or the emotional palette that music evokes. So, how does this opening concert tie in with that theme of In Living Color?
Well, the opening piece itself is extraordinarily energetic and bright and fun. And of course, that's a counterpoint to the Prokofiev, which, spoiler alert, if you haven't read Romeo and Juliet by now, probably, I think I can spoil that one, but they die. So I wanted to kind of counterpoint that kind of, that weight of that music with something really kind of fireworks to start with. And then you have this huge romantic expanse of the Amy Beach in the middle.
And then we move into the second concert, and we are seeing the return of Zuul Bailey to the symphony stage. I mean, Zuul makes regular returns as part of the connoisseur concerts, or Classics Northwest, I should say, makes regular returns to Spokane for that. But he's playing Copland in this?
No, this is a piece called Visions of Humanity. It's actually a set of variations for cello and orchestra that he has co-commissioned, actually along with Eckhart Preu, my predecessor was music director here, and they put together a consortium of orchestras to commission something in celebration of America 250. So the concert we just did last weekend was also a celebration of that, but we're carrying on that party in this concert. So by October, the party is kind of winding down a bit. So we want to really celebrate the US, and particularly with the Copland, we're playing the Suite from Billy the Kid, so the western side of the US as well.
Am I wrong in thinking that Copland has been a part of Zuul's repertoire? For some reason, I have him associated with Copland, and I'm not entirely sure why.
I honestly don't know. He has played a lot of American music, certainly, but.
And maybe that explains this co-commissioned piece, because I see Mark O'Connor's on there, and other folks that we associate with Americana. Yeah.
Exactly. And the great thing about a commission is you never know what you're going to get. So I'm very excited that the ink will probably arrive still slightly damp on the page if I know composers.
Well, while we're on that subject, so I was at the season finale with the Sidney Guillaume piece. How, in your opinion, did it go? Because I have to say, as a listener, I mean, it was the highlight of the program.
I think it's fair to say, two cliches: he understood the assignment and he stuck the landing. I think pretty much. I mean, I wanted something that celebrated and reflected, and I knew Sydney was the man for the job. We also put it together with Copeland Concerto. Copeland, you see, now you've got me on.
Yeah,
Copeland,
now I've got it in your
the
head.
Bartok Concerto for Orchestra, which uses and quotes a lot of Hungarian folk music. And I didn't specify anything to Sydney, but I kind of knew that his Haitian roots would express themselves in the piece that he wrote as well. And the first movement is this wonderful combination between Americana and Haitian music, and a reflective slow movement, and then a very driven and forward-looking finale. And, it's great when you do a contemporary piece brand new out of the box, and it gets a standing ovation both nights from the audience. I think a lot of people think of contemporary music and, clench a little bit and think, oh, good God.
Well, they think it's going to be some atonal nonsense, and this was the full-fledged opposite of that.
Very melodic, melodic. Although I am personally a fan of the atonal nonsense every now and again. But I think with Sydney, his music is so vital, and it's so direct and so tuneful, and so it's just full of life. So when I really wanted something to celebrate the beginning of America 250, he was the person I turned to first.
Yeah, to me, it paired better with the Rachmaninoff than the Bartok, simply because I felt like both of them. When we talk about palettes, I mean, there was a very broad palette there, and I think if you just wait 30 seconds, the tone is going to change, the mood is going to change, and so they seemed. That first half of the program seemed like the perfect symbiosis. Yeah. Steve, I know that you were there. What was your take on this, especially after so many years at the Oregon Symphony, where you're probably doing commissioned works, and here you have Sidney Guillaume, who's kind of a returning favorite coming back to this symphony?
I have sat through more commissioned new works for orchestra and have looked across the audience and to see the reaction. And I gotta say, the reaction that the audience had to Sidney's work was fantastic. It was rhythmic. It was lively. It was colorful. It was melodic. Everyone was so engaged with it. And you don't always get that. Interestingly, Sidney lives in Portland, Oregon, where my orchestra was home for the last 10 years, and we hadn't commissioned him. And my first thing after the day after the concert was an email to my colleagues back in Portland and said, guys, he's living in your city. He's your one. You should be thinking out for a feature commission.
Yeah, and I guess that's a nice feather in the Spokane Symphony's cap, the fact that we're recognizing and commissioning the talent that's under Portland's nose.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Couldn't possibly comment.
How very diplomatic. How very diplomatic. And then we move into the third concert, and this is in November, and this is Samir Patel, who'll be conducting this in your stead. Talk to me about Samir.
Samir is an old friend of mine. He was on the circuit of young conductors when I was a young conductor back in the day, although I suppose in conducting, young does a lot of heavy lifting for so many years. Until you turn 70, then you're maybe just getting started. So maybe I'm still considered a young conductor. But Samir and I kind of came up together. We studied together on various conducting workshops, particularly one in Estonia with Neeme Järvi, who is an absolute hero of mine. Was the music director in Detroit and New Jersey, and just a phenomenal conductor, great musician, and has been running a conducting workshop for many years now, many summers in Estonia. So that's how we met, and we became good friends. And he's an American, and I just keep a little Rolodex in my head of who's where and who's doing what, and think, okay, and then at some point I really want Samir to come and work with the orchestra, and at some point the stars align, and here he is.
And then as part of this program, I just noticed that Sibelius's violin concerto, so that's Yvette Kraft, who's going to be the soloist for that. So we have Sibelius's violin concerto, which I'm very pleased to see, but then Sibelius is going to be making a more full-throated return later in the season at a concert kind of celebrating him. Why these two pieces separated?
Well, I love Sibelius. I think a whole evening of Sibelius, again to the food metaphor, you've got to have a bit of vinegar in the dressing. You can't be too one tone about it. Also, it's a work. I mean, Yvette Kraft is from Spokane. She's an incredible violinist. She is now playing in the San Francisco Symphony in the first violins there. I think she's only ever done one orchestral audition in her life and landed San Francisco, which is pretty darn good. She's a former student of Mateusz Wolski, and her parents still live in town. We worked with her before, and she's a phenomenal musician. So we wanted to get her back, and I said, "Okay, choose whatever you want to play." And Sibelius was her first choice. So she's offering the Sibelius. But I did think about maybe putting it in with the Seventh Symphony later. But as I say, I think you can't have evenings of one composer. I think can be a little bit just
too much of a good thing.
Too much, exactly. Too much of a good thing.
And before we get into the 2027 concerts, I did want to take some time to talk about some of the outreach opportunities that the Symphony is going to be doing during the year. Steve, what do you have in mind, and what's on the calendar for some of the activities that the Symphony is going to be taking part in? While this whole Masterworks season is going on. And I'll just kind of tee you up with a stat that I had seen you quote, where I think you had tripled the amount of involvement, or the Spokane Symphony had tripled the amount of involvement in local schools in recent years. And it was aiming to even up that ante a little bit further.
Yeah, I can't take any credit for that. That just all goes to James and the team and the people who've come before me to propel that forward. I think there's so much opportunity outside the concert hall. And it's not just about bringing Beethoven to the masses and using outreach to convince, hey, this Mozart, you haven't experienced this, almost like an evangelical approach to music, like haves and have-nots almost. I like to think of it more as, what are the needs of the community? What does this community need? And what are those needs that can only be fulfilled through music? And I think when you start to look at it through that lens, you get a lot of interesting opportunities. Yes, music education, of course. And it's not necessarily, EJ, that we're going to make legions of future orchestral musicians on concert hall stages. That's not necessarily the goal of how we think it. We know your life is so much better with an instrument in your hand, or in a choral program, or in some kind of arts education. What arts education, music education does for people, in addition to make them better human beings, but it just develops youth and propels youth achievement, whether it's test scores, whether it's graduation rates, whether it's developed critical thinking skills, socialization, and just plain old grit, right? From practice, you gotta do the work. Jason Kelsey recently on a podcast talked a lot about this. He was asked, what's the secret sauce, Jason, to being this linebacker? This is actually it was a nose tackle on the Eagles. And he said, practicing an instrument. You can't fool yourself when you're practicing an instrument. If you don't do the work, it doesn't happen. And until you can practice, until you can do that, you won't be able to get anywhere. However, once you practice, once you put in the time, you unlock creativity. But you have to do the work. So that's, like, I think, a huge benefit, the practice that's required, which to me equates to grit. And my kids, my 20 and 22-year-old kids, and I think kids today benefit a lot from grit. So music education, we are all in. We are all in helping music education. Outside of music education, I go back to those community needs. What does the community needs? And usually these are specific sectors of a community, not the community writ large. So when we see so many of our loved ones in memory care and in senior centers, and we just have to ask what role music can play in the healing. We started a couple years ago the Dementia Project. We're pairing musicians and music therapists to have engagements with those experiencing memory loss, Alzheimer's, and dementia. And the results have been incredible. Not only does it bring uplift and this energy to those affected with memory loss, their families, their caregivers. It's a great program, and it really helps demonstrate like the healing powers of music. So I can't wait to do more of that music and medicine type initiatives throughout the community. That's just one example of kind of what we're planning on doing.
And James, I kind of want you both to weigh in on this and the perception of the symphony. And you were talking about bridging this gap for between the listener and music. And do you feel as though the symphony is kind of viewed sometimes at one remove, or as if it's on some elevated status, and therefore it's unapproachable by folks who might enjoy music but just see not just classical music but the symphony at sort of one remove from them?
Absolutely. In many places, yes. I think one of the great things about Spokane and the size of the city is that I think the perception of the Spokane Symphony within Spokane is actually not that we are this kind of elitist, fusty organization, but that we're very much around and fun and part of the community. But yeah, I think generally speaking in society, that is something every orchestra has to fight against, this concept of elitism. And I always say elitism isn't playing Bach. Elitism is keeping it for yourself. So I think what we need to do, and it's, as Steve just said, it's not about this kind of proselytizing and, that like the New Yorker cartoon, we bring the arts to people who don't want the arts.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually about helping people connect to themselves and connect to each other. That's what great music does. And yeah, I think every bit of copy we write, every postcard we send out, all has to give this feeling of being a welcoming and vibrant place. So I think that's something we're fighting. I always say for years and years and years, if you watch Frasier, one of my favorite sitcoms, you've got Frasier's dad who sits in his ratty chair with his dog, drinking his beer, watching the game. And then his two sons who are these effete snobs, and their love of opera and classical music and fine dining and fine wine is a kind of a shorthand in our culture for being a bit out of touch, right?
Yeah.
So that is what is just going along generally in culture nowadays. And not just in the US, this is in other places too. And so, yeah, our job as a symphony, I think, is to dispel these myths. And it's one of the reasons we have such a range of concerts. So we have the Masterworks as well, but we've got, next season we're doing 3 fantastic movies, and we're starting a new family concert series, which Steve has really spearheaded on Sunday afternoons to really bring in young people with young kids, families, again, to just make this the welcoming space that the community needs.
And I think the community outreach is a really good point to make the symphony more approachable. But I have to say, even as someone who is not necessarily put off by seeing symphony musicians routinely dressed in black, I was struck by the marketing campaign for the In Living Color season, because this is making the symphony musicians, just in fashion alone, much more approachable. Suddenly, I'm doing the double take and seeing these very familiar musicians like Mateusz dressed in clothes that he does not necessarily wear during the concert. And so you're grinning about this. And so I sense that there was some intentionality behind that.
Very much so. And I think, last season's brochure, we went for a very kind of urban, gritty, black and white look. So I think we also wanted to do something very different this year. And as I said, it fits together with this idea that the symphony is really a space for everyone. We're losing what they call third spaces. We're losing places where people can gather together that aren't home or the office. So the more welcoming, the more fun we can provide people, and the more we can touch and move them, I think that, it's a hugely important thing for the city.
I think it's also, I want to flip the concept of outreach a little bit. I want to not remove it entirely, but think about it as engagement. That, it's like if all these organizations, we're doing outreach. It's like we don't have enough insight, so we have to reach out. And I rather than keep that going, and orchestras have done outreach for God decades. I want to think of it as engagement. What is it that you want? Not what do you want to hear. It's what do you want? What do you need? And how music could try to meet that. Which is why throughout this program, book that is in front of us, there is a very robust classical season. It's probably the anchor of everything we do. And it's so many other things. We have this new family concert series that I'm so excited to bring.
And is that an initiative of yours, or was that something that was already in the works and you're just kind of helping usher it into being?
This, for me, the series itself, I think I started the conversation, but it's more about we don't have families with young kids that we're serving. Going to the symphony can sometimes be expensive. Going to the symphony is sometimes not at the right opportunity, and sometimes it's a long concert. And I wanted to try to create an initiative to normalize. We lost something in the pandemic. We lost the normalization of going to a concert. And that's something I want to try to bring back, especially for families with young kids. So this new 3-part series, the family concert series, does just that. They're hour-long concerts on Sunday afternoons, and they have all kinds of narration, probably some costumes, really specific kid-focused programmings, lobby activities, an instrument petting zoo where you get to try out all these instruments. And my hope is that if I can drop the price, because being a parent of 2 kids, I know how expensive it is to leave the house with your kids in tow. I mean, you're going to drop several $100. But I would love to offer our community a way to come in, experience these family concerts, and not have to break the bank.
Yeah, and to your point about reaching out, or that act of reaching out, so often I find that it can be taken almost as condescending. Going back to that kind of Frasier analogy, and bestowing high culture upon them, and being approachable and approaching people or the community on their own level, or on the same level, I should say, is to me, there's more merit in that. And so these family concerts seem like they're attempting to meet folks where they're at.
Bingo.
Yeah,
bingo. I've heard outreach compared to this. I don't know if it's a true concept, but I've heard it called, it feels like downreach. You're way up on this ivory tower concert hall with all your fancy clothes and Beethoven, and you're kind of reaching down. And that's not how we want to approach it. We don't want to think of it that way. So things like the family series. We also have a 3-part films. It's really exciting that orchestras can play the soundtrack of so many great films, whether it's written by John Williams, Hans Zimmer, or Danny Elfman, or whoever. And you can go hear a live orchestra concert, watch the film, have the orchestra play the soundtrack live, and they pump in all the sound effects and audio. It's a really, really cool experience, and also great for families. All of our films next year, we have 3 of them, are all going to be PG and perfect for families.
Yeah, and I'll just name them since the info is in front of us. It's The Goonies, it's Elf, which is both films that I'm partial to, and The Princess Bride, which is a cult favorite.
It's inconceivable, right?
And then just I'd like to touch on some of the Pops concerts as well. One of them is Rhapsody in Blue. I did want to question the decision to remove Gershwin from the classical repertoire and put him in a Pops concert. I always enjoyed the fact that he was that this was included in the pantheon, because it seemed like
Oh, he's still very much in the pantheon. I think all that it does is when you move it into a pop setting, it changes the look of it. So in a classical setting, you may be seeing Gershwin's music as the outcome of a certain Western tradition combined with American jazz. But I think, and then leading to Copeland. Whereas if you put it in a pops concert, you see it more in terms of Cole Porter and Tin Pan Alley and all of this other real richness and jazz that followed it. So I think for me, it's just kind of interesting to play around with the settings, because, like, as I say, you see it one way if you're in a classical concert and another way if you're in a pops.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the reasons that I enjoyed seeing it in a classical setting is because it was like jazz infiltrating the classical setting. But when you flip the script on that, then suddenly it becomes classical infiltrating a more jazz or pop setting. So that's interesting. And then coming up in after the new year, one of those concerts is the C, and then another female composer. This is Jennifer Higdon's Percussion Concerto.
Yeah,
I'm excited about this. Yeah, talk to me about this piece.
It's an amazing work. It, again, extremely colorful work. So every year I now really like to feature the musicians of the Spokane Symphony as soloists, putting them front and center. So I've chosen two this year, Clinton Webb playing the French horn, and in this program, Lee Wilson, our principal percussionist. And of course, percussion is one of those most colorful and dramatic things to play, because, if you have so many instruments, so many toys hanging around. You've got, xylophones and marimbas and all the things that you play that are tuned, but you've also then got untuned percussion and lots of exotica, and so I think for me, watching a percussion concerto is a particularly fun thing. It's a very visual experience to see the percussions running from one end of the station of all these instruments to another. And the piece itself is just such a cool piece. It's such a great way that she explores all these different colors and energies of the percussion.
And it's interesting because percussion, I mean, if I had to choose a very kind of male type of concerto, I would associate percussion with that. But then when I think of various people who've written percussion concertos or works for percussion, you got Evelyn Glennie. This seems to be an area that really champions the female composer.
I think so. I think one of the parts of it, of course, is that mostly female composers are more modern and they're more contemporary, because back in and that's one of the things we explored in the season we just finished. In the 19th centuries and before, women didn't really have the option of becoming composers. So we have these musicians composers we just looked at, Clara Schumann, Alma Mahler, and Fanny Mendelssohn, who all could have been great composers in their own right, but who never really wrote more than a handful of works very early on in their lives, because that's just not what you did as a woman in the 19th century. So I think that another part of that is that, percussion concertos are a much more modern idea. Mozart would never have dreamed of writing a timpani concerto, and so.
But it would have been interesting.
He would have figured it out.
He would have crushed it.
Absolutely, I think we can agree it would have been probably quite good. But so I think that there's part of it is that as well, which is that there is now a whole raft of great composers out there, and a lot more women are now represented in that cohort.
And I love that. I'm sorry, I love this program, James. I think this is going to be fantastic. And when I think back to the theme of music and living color, in a percussion concerto, there's like 57 things this percussionist is going to hit, and they all have different timbres and sounds and textures. That is going to be, we think about it as a percussion, but that's going to be so much color coming off the stage. And then later in the program, Debussy's La Mer, the Impressionist work. I mean, that is just going to be. This is going to be, I think, the if there was a peak or a climax of color in the season, boom.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those perennial favorites. So it's always nice to see the new works. I get supercharged by the new works, but there's these, classical standards, if you will, where even the folks who say, well, I'm not necessarily a classical music aficionado, you're going to recognize at least elements or passages from Lemaire.
That's right. And I think that's also part of the job of when you're putting together a season like this, is you want to both give the people what they want, but also lead their taste. And I love giving pieces that are perhaps totally unknown. And on this program, we have Arnold Bach's Tintagel. Mm-hmm. Bach's great English composer. I don't think the symphony has ever performed this work. It's phenomenal. It's a tone poem about this old ruined castle on the Cornish cliffs, Tintagel Castle, where I think Merlin was supposed to have been born. Mm-hmm. But it's an amazing work. And it's one of those things that you listen to it and it will blow you away. And you'll think, how have I never come across this piece before? So that, for me, is also part of the fun, is pulling things out that people just don't know and can't really, don't expect they're going to be brilliant.
When I was looking at coming here, of course, the first thing you do is open up a season brochure and say, all right, this music director, what does he program? I mean, really important. And I remember looking at this one program he did this year, and I was like, what? There's like 7 pieces on this program? And he's ending with Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra? This is crazy. What is he thinking? And it wasn't until I was sitting in the audience and watched how James put this together, this first half of all these related pieces. And it was this solemn, most holy, prayer-like first half of this theme on Thomas Tallis theme and some Bach chorales. And there wasn't a dry eye in my section I was sitting. So I think, James, you have this way to I trust you now. If I see it on paper, I'm kind of curious how that's going to work after experiencing that concert this year. Yeah, you're going to make it work.
Well, you say prayer-like, and then the second half of that is the very irreverent Jess Walter, and what a great partner in crime to have on Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra. So it was probably a concert that showcased every emotion and every facet of the symphony.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's the third time that we've worked together with Jess, and we've become good friends. And we have plans for something in the future. We're working. Neither of us really know what it's going to be yet, but I suspect we'll be found in the Peacock Lounge late one night, having thought it up. It's usually the way it works.
Well, I eagerly await the next Sidney Guillaume piece, and I also eagerly await the next Jess Walter collaboration, as does the rest of Spokane, I think. And I was going to kind of gloss over the Celebrating Sibelius, but since you mentioned tone poems, I mean, here we have a program of very distinctive and very beautiful tone poems from Sibelius.
Absolutely, yes. So there's a Finnish legend called the Kalevala, which is crazy strange. All these old ancient myths that were passed down by oral tradition. And Sibelius and his chums were so excited about this because it was a real identity for Finland, which at that time wasn't a country. Yeah. It'd been either Swedish or Russian. And we have Finlandia, which opens with those big chords, which is the lion awaking. I don't know quite why this lion is the symbol of Finland. There aren't many lions around there.
I mean, if you're trying to come up with a national identity, you can't do much worse than the lion.
This is true. This is absolutely true. I mean, we have it. We have the lion and the unicorn in the UK. So, but then yes, you have this amazing Finland awakening, and so this is also kind of exploring this idea of identity and home as well, and it has the incredible Seventh Symphony, which is an astonishingly compact and distilled work. It's one of my absolute favorites. It's only 25 minutes long, and it's an entire symphony. And the last symphony he wrote, because he finished an 8th symphony and burnt it. He discarded it. I think probably because his whole work had been leading up, his ideas that he'd got to in the 7th symphony, I think he'd been leading up to that, and he couldn't go any further. He realized the 7th had said everything that he could say in the form of that symphony.
Do we have any fragments of that 8th symphony? Has anybody unearthed sort of archival versions of this?
There is a thought that some other music that he wrote around it might have themes and bearings. So I think out there somewhere there's a recording. I think John Stoyards and the BBC Phil have a recording with kind of fragments of it. And there might be some Masonic funeral music that might have a bit theme here or there. But it's kind of impossible to say. I mean, sadly, we think he certainly burnt his copy. We think a copyist may have made a copy beforehand, but it's never emerged. It just has been lost. It's one of those great things, like if Mozart had lived to complete the Requiem, how would that sound? And how would Sibelius 8 have sounded? We just have no idea.
And they'll probably assign it to AI to posit a theory.
Sure, why not?
And then, you talk about wanting to champion symphony musicians, and I think this season is another one. So it's something that you have done, I think, increasingly in the past. And then this season has a number of symphony musicians coming to the fore. We have Mateusz coming to the fore again. And then you decide to step away for this concert that features Mateusz, but he is ably supported by Morihiko. So talk about Mateusz and the Shostakovich concerto.
So Mateusz every year plays a concerto, and every year we sit down and we scratch our heads because he's been doing it now for some considerable time. And luckily the violin repertoire is large. Thank God he's not a viola player, otherwise the 3 viola concertos would be on rotation. But he really decided Shostakovich 1 was the piece for this year. It is an incredibly important work. It was a work that was not actually published at the time that Shostakovich wrote it for fear of reprisals and recriminations. It's a very dark work, extremely intense, and a wonderful piece. And so to counterbalance that, we've programmed Dvorak's Fifth Symphony, which is a sunny, warm, and generous piece. And again, one of those pieces that is not very often played. Everybody plays Dvorak 8 and 9, possibly 7. But nobody tends to do 4, 5, and 6, and these are great works. So I'm a big fan of the Fifth Symphony. So we're putting that again as a counterbalance to the darkness of the Shostakovich. There's this warm, happy generosity of Dvorak.
I go to Shostakovich for the dark, for the cynical.
Yeah.
That's why I turn to Shostakovich. I mean, we've got the jazz suite, so that might be.
But there is also, I think, something very important that art must do. Art shouldn't just make us feel comfortable all the time. Mm-hmm. Art should disrupt. It should make you think about things. It should put you in a place where actually, psychologically, we all have to process difficult things that happen to us. And the music like Shostakovich First Violin Concerto, that darkness is something that I think is extremely cathartic and extremely important for us. So this is also an important thing. Is I don't think art and music should just be this kind of bromide of comfort at all times. I think it has an important role to play for us too, in taking us to those places where, frankly, our lives do go.
Yeah.
Shostakovich. I mean, okay. I'm getting excited about Shostakovich right now, and I hope we could return to him in a future season. You can understand better what it was like in that period of time when Shostakovich was living, Stalin and Mother Russia. You can understand that better by understanding Shostakovich. And I think that's one of the great things about music is it helps us understand the world around us and the world that came before us in a way where you can write about it, but it's not the same. The words don't do it the same like Shostakovich.
Absolutely. That always reminds me of my favorite Leonard Cohen quote. He was interviewed and he just brought a new album out, and they said, "So Leonard, what's your new album about?" And he looked at the interviewer and said, "If I could tell you, I wouldn't have had to have written the music now, would I?"
Yeah.
And I think that's perfect. I mean, who was it said? Maybe Rachmaninoff. Music starts where words leave off.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think that's absolutely certainly true.
Well, and to your point about the darkness, I mean, if I can make a pop culture or pop music analogy, when I was growing up, people would say, well, why do you listen to the Smiths? Don't you find them so incredibly depressing and morose? And I didn't find them depressing and morose. I maybe it's the misery loves company, but I found it just incredibly reassuring that there was somebody else had maybe taken the same emotional journey that I had, or maybe had the same take on things as I had had. And so there was, this almost connection there. And that's what I find in Shostakovich. I'm not, necessarily that dark all the time, but, I like to indulge my darker sides by listening to Shostakovich and really taking that in. So. And then I have to, before we leap into the next program, I wanted to talk about your opinion of opera, because the next concert is going to be Operatic Passions, and it is this kind of a laundry list of arias and whatnot from various operas. Where do you stand on opera, Steve?
I mean, back when we were talking earlier, when I was a trumpet player, I had the benefit of getting to play some trumpet with the Houston Grand Opera, one of the country's major opera companies. And the amount of coordination and project management it takes to pull off one of these just an on-stage opera with choruses, cast of 8 singers. You got you just have so many. It's an amazing thing to watch. I've always been a big opera fan. And the fact that this is kind of like dipping a toe. We no longer have a very active opera company here in the inland Northwest. I mean, I know there's been different forms that have come and go, but I would love, for so many reasons, to see us as the Spokane Symphony Orchestra maybe not do full opera productions with sets, costumes, scenery, but for me, the music is so amazing. I love the idea of concert version operas where you bring out the singers and they're standing in front of the orchestra doing the hits. Speaking of hits, this is like a home run or a triple on every on every work here. I'm super excited.
Yeah, it's Wagner, Verdi, Puccini,
Yep.
Strauss.
Yep.
It's the works. James, have you conducted much opera?
Not as much as I would like. I love conducting opera. I really do. It tends to be you get sorted, like the sorting hat comes out at the beginning of your career, and it's kind of hard to cross over, like kind of hard to bounce between symphonic music director work and opera work. But I love the opera I've done. I've loved it. And as Steve said, that there is just something about these huge, crazy productions and the coming together in this very, very unlikely way is just so exciting.
And then before we wrap up, we have this season finale that I wanted to talk about, because there are a few composers to whom I am very partial, and I am very excited to see Mahler making a return with the Symphony No. 5. Now, why did you choose to end on this trumpet leading note?
It is an amazing work. It is one of those pieces that caps any season. I think, ending a season or starting a season with Mahler, you can't go wrong. There is the sheer megalomania of it, that and interesting, he and Sibelius had a conversation about the symphony, and Sibelius said, yes, it should be pure, like crystalline water in a stream. And Mahler said, no, it must embrace the world. And Mahler's music absolutely does that. It has the profane, it has the most incredibly touching and moving moments. It's got moments of great joy, moments of utter tragedy. Everything is in there. He really throws everything into his music. And I think, yes, anybody who has been bitten by the Mahler bug, it's something, there is no cure for it. It's just something you have to keep coming back to. We'll also have a new principal trumpet. So Larry Jess, a wonderful principal trumpet of 55 years, has just retired. And I also thought it'd be kind of nice for whoever the new person is, has this iconic fanfare that opens the work. I thought that might be a nice draw for some people who might want to come and be a part of our orchestra.
Yeah, and I should emphasize the monumentality of this work, because normally we find a concert program and it's, you'll have a centerpiece and then a few works sprinkled around that. And if it's any testament to everything Mahler encompasses, his Fifth Symphony is the program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what we're doing at the beginning I've been doing these lowdown talks at the MAC Thursdays before my masterworks, where I pull the music apart. We have musical examples, some silly videos, all kinds of stuff. And we're actually going to do that with a live orchestra. So the first half of the concert will be me talking about the piece, pulling it apart, playing excerpts from it, playing probably music of other composers as well that influenced. So giving people a real in-depth feeling for this piece, and then the second half we perform it.
James, you've done this in such a great way at these lowdown concerts, which are usually on the Thursday afternoon before Masterworks concert. The thought that we could bring this to the stage is super exciting because for me, this provides context, right? It's like, we have these relationships with this music. I've known Mahler for probably about 30 years of my life, and I love hearing what James has to say about that, whether 1 year or 30 years, because you get to hear a different context of how another artist is thinking about it. And I love doing it right before we play it. So here's going to be the lowdown and all this great context. Not just like, oh, listen for the oboe here or listen for the flute here. It's not going to be like that.
The second subject comes in relative minor of being like,
I mean, that stuff gets me excited too. But the fact that we can do this on stage right before the concert for the whole audience is terrific.
Now, before I send you two out into the real world, James, you should know what's coming. We've got the lightning round, and that closes every interview. And if you'll remember, the last time you were here,
it was a controversial one.
It was extremely controversial. I had put to you your most embarrassing moment as a conductor, and I am going to spare you having to relive that embarrassment now. We're going to start off. It's always an either-or question that starts off. We've got 4 of them total. So, Steve, just getting you set up with the framework here. Now, we've talked about atonal composers and we've talked about traditional composers. I'm going to put to you, and I'll start with you, Steve. We've got an either-or, maximalist or minimalist. And you can interpret that however you want. You can think in terms of music. You can think in terms of life. You can think in terms of packing for a vacation.
Maximalist. Yeah,
maximalist. Okay. So are you taking it in terms of packing for a vacation, or are you thinking in terms of music? Do you like maximalist music?
I'm thinking music.
You want your Bruckner, you want your
appreciate
your Mahler.
Minimalism, actually. There's something really amazing about that. And I'm usually reaching for the maximalist. And when I think about the moments in my listening life and the great moments I've had listening to orchestras, it's usually not a piece of minimalist music. It's usually something that, honestly, a Mahler symphony that I heard in Germany when this orchestra I was traveling with was on tour. I still remember it wasn't the loud stuff; it was some of the soft stuff, and how my hairs were standing on end on my arm. That wasn't minimalism. That was a maximalist approach of the range of expression that an orchestra can do.
Well, to me, that's why Mahler works, because you have the bombast, you have the grandiose, and then that's only to contrast those more contemplative moments. James, same question.
A maximalist all the way.
Okay.
Absolutely. Musically, everything, food, you name it. I don't know. I think, I think one of the great joys of life is exploring, and I think I have only one talent I really genuinely think, which is curiosity. I am so curious about things. I go down rabbit holes online like you wouldn't believe. But for me, I don't know, there's something just about this getting to explore all these different things is so much more exciting. I mean, I've never been one for sitting cross-legged quietly in a room for 3 hours meditating. I've tried, but I just not quite got there yet.
I will join you down those internet rabbit holes. To me, the Wikipedia is it is the realization of all the promise of the web.
Absolutely. The one corner of the web.
All right, James, if you could hear one piece of music again for the first time, what would it be?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's so almost impossible to say. I think it probably would have to be the first piece of classical music I ever heard, which was in a school assembly when I must have been 8 years old. We didn't have it in the house. It was not something I'd encountered. And it was the William Tell Overture, the famous bit, the Lone Ranger theme.
The Bugs Bunny bit, yeah.
The Bugs Bunny bit. And I was just amazed. Growing up only ever hearing certain kinds of music, suddenly this whole other world exploded in my mind. And so I think, it's not that I really want to hear the William Tell Overture again for the first time, but just I would love to experience that thrill of discovery, of, oh my goodness me, there is something entirely different that I've never experienced before.
Yeah, those epiphanical moments. And curiosity lends itself to that, but it's, there's nothing like that first exposure. Steve?
I came to the music of Strauss kind of late, but I remember like something like Alpine Symphony, hearing Alpine Symphony live for the first time. And, the thing is, when you have this long relationship with a piece of art or a piece of music, what's coming up. How many times do you hear a deceptive cadence? It's not deceptive anymore because the deceptive cadence, or this moment's coming up. But I would say something like Alpine Symphony's big Straussian tone poem.
And I think that was the first music ever put, or classical music ever put, to compact disc.
Really?
And
wow.
I know that a recording that I have is infuriating because there's breaks between each track.
Alpine Symphony goes in one big.
It should.
It should. Swoop. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine when those breaks come up and you're just kind of bracing yourself.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Not good. Have you ever experienced a natural disaster like an earthquake or a tornado? Maybe down in Texas?
Never an earthquake. I would say hurricanes were pretty. Mm-hmm. They would come through, and I would say the coolest moment. So there was Ike. I think we stayed in our house in Texas for Hurricane Ike. First there was Rita and Katrina, and then a few days after was Rita, and everyone left Houston for Hurricane Rita because they saw what happened with Katrina in New Orleans. It was only a month before. Ike was a couple of years later, and after everyone left, we kind of said, none of us need to leave. And we stayed put. And it just so happens, I lived in a northern suburb. The eye came over the house. And it wasn't, at this point, it wasn't like, category 2 or anything like that. It was probably less than. But it was neat to watch, because it was at night, because we can see the wind was blowing the trees one way, and then the eye, and then it was calm. We couldn't look up and see clear skies or anything. But then, almost like on cue, the wind came from the other direction, because the wind whips around in the eye. It goes circular. So when it came through the other way, all the trees bent the other way, and that's when they unrooted.
No kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding. James, what's your experience with natural disasters?
Well, growing up in the UK, where we have one of the mildest countries in the world,
I was wondering.
We get a lot of rain, but I wouldn't call that natural disaster. No, I think I was once in Japan, and it wasn't a huge earthquake, but it's the first time I experienced one. And I was staying in a very tall hotel in Osaka, and I was woken up in the night by what I thought was somebody hammering on my door. And I kind of woke up and I was a little confused, and I looked around and it was the bathroom door. And I thought, who is in the bathroom hammering the door? And it was actually my wash kit that had hung on the back door. And the wash kit was basically hanging still, and the building was moving around it. It was slapping because, of course, well-built earthquake architecture. The whole point is they flex and bend, and this whole hotel was moving back and forth and hitting against my wash kit. That was a real moment of kind of wonder for me. And then, yeah, you realize quite how puny and tiny we are as the human race and how little control we have over any of these great elemental forces.
You preempted my follow-up question was, did it encourage any existential reflection on your part? And it clearly did. So
yeah. It didn't. I mean, I didn't change. It didn't change me in any way, but it certainly made. It's always good to It's like when you go out and look at the stars at night, and you have that feeling of cosmic insignificance.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's so important, particularly if you're having a rough time and a rough day, and something happened, and you did this, and somebody said that, and it's all gone bad. And then you look at the stars, and you think, it's millions of years of light going on out there. This is nothing.
Well, on that note, we're going to talk about the afterlife for the final question. Do you believe in reincarnation? And this is a two-parter, so you can imagine what the second part is going to be. But do you believe in reincarnation?
Oh, how long we got? I personally believe, I don't believe in reincarnation, but I do think there is a huge kind of soup of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And if you want to call that God, that's totally fine. I don't mind what you call it. And we are just these little sprouts of that consciousness when we live our lives. And when we die, I think we go back into the soup. That's kind of my feeling. And if you want to call that heaven, you can all call that heaven. But this is my feeling. So do I believe in reincarnation? If you think of it in the sense that we're all the same thing anyway, yeah. But I personally think we're going down woo-woo territory now.
No. I'm intrigued. I almost wish we had led the interview with this, because we would have gone on some interesting tangents.
Next on Spiritual Talk, DJ Ionelli. So I think there is something, and I think, but for me, what the most important thing is that we're all connected. Mm-hmm. We're all connected, and I think we feel disconnected, and we feel people are separate from us. But the minute you start to see humanity as being, and all of life as being, the same thing, it's an incredibly beautiful thought.
Well, the follow-up question is, and maybe this isn't so clear-cut now, but what would you, provided reincarnation is real, what would you like to come back as?
I think it'd be hard to beat being a well-looked-after domestic cat.
A cat?
Sleeping all day long, knocking stuff off high shelves, generally being a pain in the neck.
Are you more cat than dog?
I think I'm 50-50.
Okay.
But I don't know. Being a cat feels like less work.
Yeah. Steve, what about you? So first part is, do you believe in reincarnation?
No.
No? Okay.
Next question.
Very simple. Well, provided reincarnation were real and you were informed tomorrow, like, hey, this is going to be a thing. What is your ideal entity to come back as once you're reincarnated?
Oh my God, I know you can make a wonderful living being a Carnegie Hall stagehand, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And here's some of the greatest, greatest music. I think I would come back as a
Carnegie Hall stagehand
at Carnegie Hall for the money and for the art.
Yeah, and so if anybody is listening to this and is just starting out on their career journey, then now they know that that's an option available to them.
Yes, absolutely.
Very attractive one. Well, Steve and James, thank you so much for coming in here and taking us on this whirlwind tour of the 2026-2027 season, as well as some of the outreach opportunities for the Spokane Symphony.
Thank you,
so
EJ.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been A Line Around Your Thoughts. My name is EJ Ionelli, and my guests this week were James Lowe and Steve Wenig of the Spokane Symphony. You can hear the symphony perform at the July 4th celebrations in Riverfront Park this weekend, and you can find out more about their upcoming season at SpokaneSymphony.org. As we close, a nod to our founding sponsor, Rogue Heart Media SPC, proudly rooted in Spokane and supporting our community with media that makes a difference. For more, visit rogueheart.media. If you are interested in becoming an episode or a season sponsor and keeping these conversations going, please reach out through our website at alaytpodcast.com. And to show your support for A Line Around Your Thoughts and even join the conversation yourself, become a part of our Patreon community. Check out our page at patreon.com/ALAYT. You can also get updates and engage with us on Mastodon at alaytpodcast@pnw.zone, on Blue Sky at alayt.bsky.social, and Instagram at ALAYT_podcast. Until next week.